Wholesalers, tell me something. What is the object of your wholesaling affection? I've got a strong inclination that if it has the word Barron's in front of it, that is the object of one of your affections. A Barron's 100 advisor, a Financial Times 500 advisor. Name your favorite top advisor list, and I'll bet you that name either appears on a prospect list or on an existing client list. And that's why I know that you're going to enjoy the conversation that we have upcoming with that very elusive creature, the Barron's 100 independent advisor. Welcome to the only podcast on the planet dedicated to exploring the art, science, and lifestyle of wholesalers and their leaders. This is the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. I'm your host, the founder of Wholesaler Masterminds, Rob Shore. Wholesalers, welcome back to the next episode of the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. Wholesalers, I listened and watched the video for this advisor's practice. And I got to tell you, I just got to tell you her story because I love her story and I love the video she did, both in the production quality as well as her message. So she starts out as a kid. Dad sadly passes away when she was 11. And left a whopping $10,000 in a family life policy. But the problem was there was 6 kids in the family. They went from a middle income household to abject poverty. Then she has a run-in with the law as a 16-year-old in a car accident. And we may or may not get to that. But she ends up being charged and charges dismissed, found innocent of involuntary manslaughter. But finding the money for that actual defense was, well, a little hard to come by, to put it mildly. She's only one of 2 people I know that was on the Wheel of Fortune. You see, the other person that I know that was on Wheel of Fortune did not win a dime. She actually won. And she took that money and gave it to an unscrupulous stockbroker and lost it all. This gives you some context about our guest today, who is in fact a Barron's top 100 independent advisor. She's built this financial services company from nothing in 1989 to a multi-million-dollar self-managing business with offices in Frisco, Texas, and Atlanta, Georgia. I gave you some elements of her personal story of overcoming poverty and adversity in her early life and building one of the top financial planning firms in the nation. And she's been featured with this story and her success in numerous articles and publications. Her business success has been recognized by Barron's and D Magazine and Success. She's made numerous television appearances to include CNBC, Fox News, Bloomberg, PBS, and she twice has been a winner of the Best Practices Award by Investment News. She is a speaker, and she is available through Wholesaler Masterminds Speakers Bureau. She is a speaker on business leadership, building a self-managing company. And one of the things that's very interesting is her Spend the Day with My Team program, which maybe we'll ask her a little bit about. She's married to Bob, and you probably have seen Bob, though you wouldn't know you've seen Bob because he's an American Airlines pilot. So he's up there in the cockpit getting us from point A to point B safely. Erin Botsford, welcome to the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show.
Thank you very much. What a nice introduction.
You are quite welcome. I told you I'd do my homework on you.
You did.
I did. I want to talk a little bit. First, the first thing I want to talk about is this building a self-managing company concept. And the reason this is important, Erin, I think we can learn from you and apply it back to our practices as a wholesaler. What are some of the elements of a self-managing company? Please define it for us and then help us identify some of the qualities of it. Because again, I know there are elements that we can extract from your wild success as an advisor back into our practices in wholesaling. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, the idea is that a business is not a business if it depends upon you. And it took me a number of years to figure that out. In fact, I was going to Dan Sullivan's strategic coach, and I was challenged on that because I was, initially started off as a salesperson. I was a stockbroker, and then I was taught how to build a practice. And the idea of, but the practice always depended on me showing up. And so finally, in my strategic coach class, I realized that, if we compare our businesses to other real life businesses, that the business, it really isn't a business if it depends on your day-to-day involvement. And so if you think about a dentist, for instance, the dentist comes in and maybe he does the real work of the business. He does the drilling and the root canals or whatever. But when you go to the dentist for your teeth cleaning, he's not sitting in there cleaning your teeth or doing the x-rays. There's a lot of things that other business professionals don't do. And unfortunately, in our industry, we just always think that we have to do everything. And so I have figured out over the last 28 years how my business actually doesn't depend on me at all. And it allows me a lot of freedom to do other things.
I think there are elements of that we can definitely extract wholesalers. I mean, clearly, we have to be the ones that show up in, as an example, Erin's office to obtain a meeting with Erin and tell her about the product and how it might be a right solution for the portfolios that she constructs for clients. But there are things we, of course, also could and should outsource. And I love the analogy that you used, Erin, about the dentist. The dentist doesn't set his own appointments. The dentist doesn't clean the teeth. The dentist doesn't do, the ordering of supplies and materials. There's a staff of folks to help them. So wholesalers, I think the analogy there is your scheduler. What a perfect plug for Wholesaler Mastermind schedulers. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. The scheduler, the assistant, the internal partner, of course, is pivotal. So I think that's the way that I would spin it into the analogy, Erin. Would that be a fair way to recap it?
It's very fair. And I will tell you this, being a professional on my end, unfortunately, I have a greater respect for the wholesalers who aren't contacting me directly, because I think, oh my goodness, they're operating their business as a business just like I am. So I think there's a certain sort of status level that you want to get to where I certainly wouldn't expect them to be reaching out to me themselves. I expect them to have a team and operate as a business just like I do.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Let's make that our kind of gateway into how, in your opinion, or your experience more than your opinion, how does a wholesaler get the time and attention of an elite advisor such as yourself? I really want to peel the onion on this, because you see, we don't get a chance to talk to a host of elite advisors like yourself. I want to understand more about what you think and what you feel and where we succeed and where we stub our toe. And that's why I'm really going to use this valuable time wisely with you. So first, you've not met a wholesaler before. They want to try to get some airtime with you. What are some of the initial steps that are going to be successful? What are some of the initial steps that actually are going to train wreck them and they'll never see the light of day in your office?
Well, first of all, I have great admiration for wholesalers. And I will tell you, and I've told all of my people that work for me, is everything I've ever learned about this business, I learned from a wholesaler. So I may be a little bit different than other people. I am very respectful of their role in my life and the growth of my company. So that being said, and this sounds very superficial, but the wholesalers that I will bend over backwards for are ones who recognize that I'm a person, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and I'm a grandmother. And maybe it's just because I'm a female. I don't know. But there are a couple of wholesalers who were smart enough in my world to know when my son, when I had my first grandchild, and they found out that my first grandchild's name was Cooper, and my second grandson's name is Carson. And they sent personalized gifts to me with Cooper and Carson's name on it. And they have carte blanche entry into my world because of that. And
Erin,
I know that sounds really silly.
No, it's not silly.
But how simple is that?
It's simple, but it's not easy. And
right.
Here's the thing about that. And though you are new to knowing about our work at Wholesaler Masterminds, if you look back into our very recent archives, you'll see the show that we did with Sam Richter. We talked about the importance of advisor reconnaissance. We are huge proponents. I speak about it from the platform all the time and coach to it all the time about the importance of advisor reconnaissance. How can I touch your heart and how can I touch your head? And if I can touch your heart along with your head, or even before your head, I have an opportunity to melt the natural icicles that exist around the sales situation. And you just gave, unrequested, a glowing endorsement of why this works. Because
it does. It really, really does.
And by the way, it's the same thing an advisor should do in advance of meeting a prospect.
Absolutely. In fact, we just did it we try and emulate that. We had a client whose daughter got married last Saturday, so we sent champagne and strawberries to our client at their hotel the night of the rehearsal dinner.
Brilliant.
And they got back from the long evening, and there was champagne and, strawberries. And my business partner went to the wedding the next day, and she said, oh, my gosh, she said this client just couldn't stop gushing over, the silly champagne and strawberries, but it worked.
Yeah, not respectfully, not. I understand why you say it in the self-deprecating fashion you do, but not silly at all. I mean, it's foundational, and the thing that is so different when you started your firm in 1989, unless you had some sort of connectivity to that prospect, you maybe wouldn't have known that if it was a cold prospect, right? But in today's age, with everyone having a lot, if not everything, online, you can figure out a whole lot of ways to touch the heart and the head.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's what works. That's when wholesalers get carte blanche. What are the places that make your skin crawl, you blanch, you just kind of shake your head and go, and by the way, you gave such a beautiful compliment to the community, and I just want to acknowledge that. The fact that you would give props to the community for a portion, and you said a portion, if not all, of what you know in the business is so gracious of you, and I thank you for that for them. What makes your skin crawl? What just doesn't work?
Well, and by the way, what I said was God's truth, and so I'm not trying to gush anything. It's the way I feel. I mean, when I know that this may sound different, but when wholesalers take me out to lunch and they've delivered value to me and they've taught me something, I actually pay for their lunch.
We wish we had a whole book of you, Erin. Trust me, we wish we had a whole book of you. It's not that way.
Well, I know, but I try and set an example in the industry. I know I don't have a lot of ability to set that example, but I certainly try and set the example with my own team and say, don't take advantage of these people. They're providing a great service to you, and when you can return that, that's great. In fact, we have wholesalers that I just took my team on a trip. I take my team each year. We set a goal, and if we meet our goal, I take them on a trip. Last year we went to Napa. This year we went to Lake Tahoe, and we basically invite our 2 or 3 favorite wholesalers to come with us. And not because they have to do anything, but it's the ones that have contributed the most to our practice in the last year. So they bring their wives. There's no business that's discussed necessarily, and it's really great. So we have great relationships with our wholesalers.
That's awesome. Let's get back to the question then. So if they want to get your time and attention, we established one way that might happen: doing good homework, mentioning something about your family, your children, your grandchildren, etc. What gets under your skin? What positively doesn't work? What sort of train wrecks have you seen in the past?
I'll give you an example. I have 20 people on my team, and so I have, a number of gatekeepers, and so I really like for the people that work for me to vet out the different wholesalers and vet out the different products. And we have a system, and so my expectation is that they will, they'll go through the system and they'll meet with JP or Kyle or any one of the people that work for me, knowing that, at some point, they're making the decisions anyway. When you have a self-managed company like I do, the idea that they need to see me for some reason is kind of silly, because I'm not the one anymore in my company that makes the decision. So I think the words could be to your mastermind group or your people is that figure out who the decision makers really are in the company. It's not, in my case, it's not Erin Botsford. And so the things that upset me is that they will call or they'll email, and I am always very polite, and I email back and say, please meet with Kyle or JP. At this point in my career, they're really, vetting all the ideas and making all the decisions. And if they don't take that as I'm trying to be truthful with them, and they still keep bugging me, then I get mad.
Yeah.
And
what's so tough?
I think that's the only thing that really kind of bugs me.
What's so tough about that? And not to defend anyone whose behavior is off-putting, but what's so tough about that is there are enough prospects that will give you the Heisman and try to push you off to someone because, that person would be their designated, we don't want to talk to you person. In your case, it's just sincere guidance about how to make an approach into your practice. So to discern that can be tricky, if not impossible.
But I do think it's there's, to some degree in my practice, I've always had people who would vet out, because, truthfully, we could be having breakfast, lunch, cocktails, dinners, 7 days a week with different wholesalers, because there's just a lot of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want all of the ideas, and I want all of the product knowledge, and I want to hear about them, but no one person, I would never get any work done. And I think if everybody realizes that that's the situation, but if you have somebody in the firm, and if it's a responsible firm, they want to hear these ideas and these product, features and benefits and stuff like that. So, once a week I get sort of a briefing of what's new, what's out there, what should be using, and then. But even if we decide to use a product, that doesn't necessarily mean I make it a requirement that I have to meet with the wholesaler. So, another thing that I really like is when a wholesaler will, treat my staff, bring my staff lunch, take them to the Mavs game, do things like that for my staff, because they're the ones that are always doing the grunt work. I'm the one that gets on the cover of magazines, but they're the ones actually doing the work. So I love it when they're respectful to the staff and treat them well, and treat them with the respect that they should be treated with.
We talk about that, and it almost makes me shake my head that there's still folks that would begin to think that anything other than equal reverence for the leader, Erin, or any of her team is the right protocol. It disappoints me that we still have folks that believe that the receptionist is, quote, just the receptionist, that they're not a vital part of the organization inside of Erin's practice, and therefore again comes with the same reverence as if Erin picked up the phone. Tell me about frequency. So this is something that wholesalers are always curious about. Let's talk about products that you use, folks that would earn the right to be on one of these annual trips. What is your desire? What is the right frequency with which I should stay in front of you live? Because, of course, my best client is somebody else's best prospect. How do I make sure that I see you just enough, but I don't overdo it?
Right. Well, I know that the people that come on our annual trips, I see them in here, let's call it once a quarter, bringing lunch in to the staff and having a meeting or something like that. And I think that the ones that we really admire and respect, yes, they have product information, but they're also giving us best practice ideas. Now, one thing that I don't like, I will tell you this, is there was a wholesaler that came in one time, and basically he was telling me by name what other people in our industry were doing. Oh, this person does this and that person does this. By name, they were basically revealing this person's, I call it their trade secret.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I shut that down in just a nanosecond, because yes, I want to hear the ideas, but I have to assume that anything that he's telling me, he would just turn, if I tell this guy what we do, he's turning around and by name saying, this is what Erin Botsford does. And I basically banned him from our office. So while he thought that he was bringing us great competitive research, best practices, all it meant was that he is violating someone else's confidence.
Boy, that's an important message.
I have to make the assumption he's going to violate my confidence
as well. That's an important message, Erin. So what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing is I can bring you insights, I can bring you global, if you will, intelligence, but I have to be very mindful of violating the confidence of another practice.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And in so much that if I ask you, so can I assume that so-and-so, that you need to deny it.
Mm-hmm.
I need to know that you're protecting their confidence with everything that you have, because then I can be assured that if I am revealing, because sometimes if you get to know these wholesalers, going out and having cocktails with them, you reveal vulnerabilities about your practice.
Of course.
You reveal things maybe after your second glass of wine, but I certainly don't want that spread all over the Dallas Metroplex.
I used
and so,
yep.
It's really easy to see a wholesaler who will basically violate that trust. If I ask them about something about somebody else's practice and they tell me, they're done with me.
Important word of warning, wholesalers. Integrity is everything, and to be judicious with what you hear. I used to say that my next job after wholesaling would be a man of the cloth because we hear so much. You got to be very careful. All right, our time is ticking down. We're going to go a little longer, but it's such a valuable call. I hope you don't mind. I want to ask you about DOL. So DOL is a hot topic for everybody. I know we could do a whole call separately about your thoughts about DOL, but let's stay kind of focused. What can a wholesaler do to assist you in your practice relative to DOL today?
Well, it just depends on what kind of wholesaler it is, right? I still think there's so much up in the air, and truthfully, I don't even have a good handle on it myself, and we're trying to get all the information that we can. But I think until April comes along, it's going to be kind of, up in the air. So I don't know. I can't even answer that question because, my broker-dealer is LPL, and I don't have any confidence that they know exactly how this thing's all going to pan out. So I don't have any expectations for a wholesaler to help guide me through that, if that's what you're asking. I think it'd be great, but a VA wholesaler may have a different take on the BIC and all of that than a mutual fund wholesaler versus a money management firm. So I don't know that there's any one size fits all. And at this point, I think a lot of people are coming in with their company's opinions versus reality. So.
And do you believe that sharing those learned insights are valuable to you and your team? And the reason I'm asking that is we just did, and you'll see it back in our show notes, we just did a 40-minute podcast with two different experts about the impact of DOL on wholesalers and their leaders. And one of the things that came through loud and clear from Steve Salzman, who's one of the experts we had on, was the importance of education and helping advisors kind of understand the current status, kind of where it's headed, helping apply it back to individual product silos so that advisors can begin to feel more and more informed. Would you say that that's a sound practice?
Sure.
Okay. It's important, of course, to everybody. And I know that our listeners are just trying to get their footing on what advisors want to learn, what's still to be revealed, of course, which is a lot. The last thing I want to ask you about is your Spend the Day with My Team program. How does it happen? Who has access to it? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, that has been so much fun. And, finally in the last year, I've started to speak at industry conferences. Not something I ever sort of decided to do before that, but I feel like being in the top 100, I feel like there's a responsibility now that I have to give back to my industry. So I have been speaking a little, and right before I decided to do my first speech, there's something that a lot of people don't know about me, and that is my husband and I are very heavily involved in a couple orphanages in Africa, in Zambia. Mm-hmm. So basically what I decided to do is create a program, and advisors can come into my office. We only take like 18 at a time. They pay $2,500. They spend the day with my team. They come in, they start at 8, they leave at 5. Every member of my team, not every member, but every department is represented. They walk away with a ginormous binder full of information on all of our systems and our processes, all of our legal agreements. Just the legal agreements alone is a $30,000 value.
Oh, yeah.
I charge $2,500, and the bottom line is I'm giving half of that money away to my orphanages. And so it makes it really, really worthwhile for me to do. And hopefully, we're going to gain more traction and have more advisors come in because it's just a win-win for everybody.
Well, I suspect after this podcast gets out, you'll have a few more people knocking on your door in interest of that.
Oh, good.
So that's awesome. Erin, I really appreciate your time and your wisdom and your insights and candidly, your mutual respect for the wholesaling community. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Wholesalers, come back next time for another episode of the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. You'll find all of our content at wholesalermasterminds.com, and the podcast can be found at iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play.